So with every new Star Wars Unlimited set, we see all the new leaders and there's always a yellow leader that ends up exhausting a bunch of stuff. And I go, it's probably not going to be that good. I mean, you're just exhausting things. And then I end up being wrong. I was wrong about Django. And with set 5 Legends of the Force, I think I was wrong about Cal Kestis too, because in this video, we're going to go over my Cal Temple of Destruction aggro deck, which is an extremely fast, potent aggro deck that specifically is really good at beating other aggro decks. So the order might have fallen, but Cal will not let you down. In this video, let's jump into the list. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Main Deck and welcome to another Star Wars Unlimited deck profile for set 5 Legends of the Force. In this video, we're looking at a yellow-red Cal Kestis Temple of Destruction aggro deck, and this is actually a very similar, it has a lot of the skeleton of the Ahsoka aggro list that we posted in set 4, but it's got probably a better leader and a lot of really powerful plays, especially if you're fighting other aggro decks. This shouldn't be too difficult to explain, so let's just jump right into the list here. Now, looking at our leader, Cal Kestis has the front side action, exhaust, use the Force. Your opponent chooses a ready unit and they exhaust it. Now they get to choose, right? So they're going to always choose the thing that is the weakest or the thing that is least relevant to the board, but that's okay. The point is you have access to this. You can slow them down slightly sometimes, or you can make some really strong plays in the format a little bit more awkward right now, which is totally cool. He flips on 4, right? So a great aggro leader. We love looking at aggro leaders that flip earlier on to really mount that pressure. And Cal Kestis is actually really sweet as a 4 deploy leader, 3 power, 4 HP, and has on attack. We no longer have to use the Force. Just on attack, an opponent chooses a ready unit and exhausts it. And I've had a few games where the opponent simply wasn't able to deal with Cal. They were a more space-focused deck, and Cal just got to exhaust things every turn and didn't take too many turns before the game was over. So if the opponent doesn't answer him, then he usually can take over a race situation like that. They'll usually answer him pretty quick, but he's always good for some early damage. And that's, that's really solid. That's all we're really looking for in this aggro list. Now, of course, as an aggro list, the purpose of this deck is to attack your opponent's base as much as possible. And we're going to be using Temple of Destruction as our base for this one because we do want to get the Force. We want to basically always have the Force available to us so that when the timing is right, that's the trick with Cal. You have to hit the exact right timing, then you can exhaust your opponent's unit. So Temple of Destruction is going to make it so we do basically all the time. There's actually only one unit in here that is incapable of gaining you the Force on its just basic attack, but even it can with some of the ways we have of buffing our attacks. So it's pretty much guaranteed you're always going to have the Force available to you unless the opponent is just totally controlling everything that you're doing. But generally this deck kind of commits more to the board, goes pretty fast, makes it a little harder to control absolutely everything, and just tries to push that win as fast as possible. And generally also, if the opponent is playing events to control your board, they're not putting units in, so you don't need to be exhausting anything, so you're not taking damage back, and you can just kind of sit back, take initiative, and wait for them to sort of run out of steam. Now, it is possible. There's control decks that are built to deal with the slowed around decks. They'll be able to take you out of the game, but that's the risk you play with the aggro deck. And a lot of the time against decks that are playing a little, not having absolutely everything to stop you, this deck just goes way too fast for them. So looking at our units now, we have again, a lot of similarities to that Ahsoka profile we posted. So we do have 3 Greedos here as a 3 power unit, as a 1-drop. The 1 defeated, not super relevant in here, but sometimes nice, sometimes useful. But really, he's just there as a cheap thing that can trigger Temple of Destruction, puts more damage on the board. Lux Bonteri. Now, this is an exciting unit that I think is going to start to see maybe a little bit more play here, because especially with the rise of things like Jedi Consular, and then the General's Blade on early drops like Gunji or Yaddle, there are even more ways now for opponents to play things for cheaper, and this sort of like ruins some of their turn sometimes when they do that. It's extremely good against pilots, of course, because there are a lot of pilots that have a lower piloting cost than their cost to play them, and that means that they're gonna put the pilot on usually a ready ship, and then Lux can just go ahead and rest that ship when they play it. So it gives you, it's another element that gives you a bit of control in those sort of like aggro mirror matches against like a fast Kaz. And I've really actually enjoyed him. And of course he has 3 power, so he triggers Temple. Sabine Wren, the one unit that doesn't trigger Temple of Destruction on her own, but she's just a solid enough unit. Great against some of these shielded units. We have another new 2/2 shielded unit now in Vigilance this time as a 2-drop, and Sabine is great for taking it off the board if you are worried about your opponent, trying to keep your opponent off of getting the Force so you can just push more damage in. But otherwise, you just send her at the base, still does a lot of damage. Cassian Andor is like a mandatory card in these aggro decks because you are just going to smuggle him, and then late game he's going to be that extra push of 3 damage to close it that you need. Ezra Bridger, I still love Ezra in this deck, just like the Ahsoka deck, because you will win games, especially in this version compared to the Ahsoka deck, because when we get to the events, there are tons of events that Ezra can play off the top that will push a really huge tempo swing in your favor. So as long as that Ezra can last a turn, which can't always, but if he can, you're going to get a crazy amount of advantage from it. Now, Vernestra Rowe is like a ground Millennium Falcon, and she's like been really crazy actually here, especially with this deck's capability of getting the Force. As long as you can stick anything to the board, then Vernestra comes in when played as a 3/4, readies, and then attacks and deals 3 and gets you the Force back again, so you don't lose any momentum at all of doing that. She pushes damage really fast. She is a target for Hotshot Blaster, which is something that Millennium Falcon can't do, and she is still going to be a heroism unit, so she's going to get pumped by Red 3. She just she does everything. She's so good. Definitely been a huge fan of Vernestra in here. She fits the bill for just getting to push that good early damage, and then sets you up for a next turn where you get to swing again, then flip that Cal, go to town, exhaust whatever you need to. And that's one thing I should mention here too about just exhausting your opponent's board, is sometimes it's not about the race, but it's about your opponent being unable to attack your thing. So it does make it a little bit easier for you to keep your units in play when you can, for example, exhaust their unit, then play Ezra, and they couldn't attack into him. They might be able to take initiative. It depends on what they've done. And if they do, then they go ahead and just, then they can attack him with that next turn, but you're still delaying kind of everything that they're doing and buying yourself more time, playing to the right arena. It's usually good. So that's why units like Vernestra are usually able to last a couple of turns pretty strong. K2SO, of course, one of the strongest 4 drops you're going to play, just that 4/4 Overwhelm with that when defeated, pushing 3 extra damage. He does a ton, but he's got some competition now with Quinlan, right? This new Quinlan, I'm loving this guy. Now, he's not a heroism unit, so he's not going to get bumped by Red 3, but he's a 4/5 that has on attack, if his power is 6 or more, then you get to deal 2 more damage to the enemy base. So we have Hotshot Blaster, Surprise Strike, Breaking In, and Trust Your Instincts, all as ways to pump that damage up. So it's really easy to land a Quinlan and just have any of those available to you to then suddenly push him in for 8 damage. It closes games really, really fast. The opponent suddenly has to deal with Quinlan, and that just gives you more time for some of your other units that have been able to stick around, because again, when we push those attacks off a little bit, the opponent has to deal with a lot more on board in a shorter amount of time, and so that gives you these opportunities to swing in again and again with a couple of these smaller units and close the gap even on those high HP bases like Data Vault. You can beat them with the amount of damage you're dealing here. Now, moving into space, Green Squadron A-Wing, obviously the standard with that Raid 2, works great with Temple of Destruction. That's why we run Temple instead of like the Force base. We just have more of these units that will trigger it, even though we're going to go down 3 HP. Trying to fit a bunch of Force units in here just ends up being like not enough damage to actually win. You need those kind of 3 damage swings, which is what everything is capable of doing, even though Sabine is doing it in a weird way and doesn't get to trigger Temple. Disabling Fang Fighter, now I have that in here too. Another 3 power unit, so it's good to have. But this one is here specifically because, man, those lightsabers, they're just everywhere. Lightsabers are everywhere. Shields are pretty common on stuff. Not the greatest thing to disabling Fang Fighter a shield, but especially if your opponent is dropping a General's Blade on a Gunji or a Yaddle or something, or an Adigalia, then you can go ahead and deal with the General's Blade and set your opponent back. Like, the big thing is those decks are mid-range decks typically, where they're trying to get into that mid-game and then use that advantage that either General's Blade or Consular or whatever gives them in order to play stronger units that are going to get them a bunch more value. That's like the definition of a mid-range deck. And so we need to respect that mid-range is usually the deck that's going to beat an aggro deck, and this disabling Fang Fighter is going to kind of steal some of those games back into our favor, still committing some power to board, possibly even annoying power to deal with if the opponent spent their first 2 turns playing a Gunji and an upgrade. Then they have to then come up with a way to go to space and take care of this. It's probably going to get in for some damage. So definitely worth playing this thing in here to try and just buy you a little bit of extra time before the opponent plays those big, like 2-for-1 plays in the mid-range deck. Rest of Space Millennium Falcon. It's like Vernestra, but it's in space, I guess, and it costs resources, but it's in space. So the space is still nice. Falcon's still good. Still so good, just pushing damage fast. Red 3 also another way. Red 3 the choice, of course, if you've been able to keep a few units on board, and again, using that Cal Exhaust to help those units stay in play, or maybe force the opponent, they're going to put something down to deal with Red 3, but they have to then choose between exhausting their leader or the unit they put in space, and they go, I guess I'll exhaust the space unit. You know, there are all these little ways you're just going to get that extra value, but that's it in this deck. That's all the units. The highest cost, again, we're playing is 4, because if we haven't won by about turn 5, when we're playing a couple of surprise strikes or something, it's getting pretty hard to win at that point. Maybe 6, depending on like Data Vault deck. You got to go like a little bit deeper, but even then, you just rather would commit multiple things to board, or when you get to 5, play a Cassian on 5 is always going to be, you know, a solid play for that turn, especially after you've already attacked with a few things. Now, going into our events, we have 3 Daring Raid. Daring Raid deals 2 damage to their base, and that's why it's good. It costs 1, it deals 2. Ezra loves to find it. You love to, you know, on that 5 resource turn, I think it was saying turn 5, or sorry, on the 5 resource turn 4, you are looking to like surprise strike, breaking in Daring Raid or something if you have been able to keep a board at all. And that usually just adds a crazy amount of damage to the opponent's base and wins the game for you. And in a pinch, you can deal 2 damage to something, like especially against a Han 2 deck where you have to kill something that's already damaged in order to not lose to it. You know, you can always Daring Raid that then. Trust Your Instincts, though. This is the new one that I love in this set. This is so good in here because, of course, it's so easy for us to have the Force. And now this is a, look, this is crazy. This is like a 1 cost, not quite Surprise Strike, but not like Breaking In is +2/+0 Saboteur. This is +2/+0 for 1 instead of 2. Instead of getting Saboteur, though, you gain this Shoot First effect. So you're able to deal damage before taking damage back. And usually you're just fine sending 2 to base for 1. Again, these are like 3 more copies of Daring Raid in that case. But sometimes you can use this to deal with something on board and take nothing back, and really buy yourself that time that you need to either race the game out or just get in more attacks with your opponent's scrambles to find another way to deal with things, especially if they're putting a Sentinel in your way or something. A Trust Your Instincts on the Sentinel is going to be a really, really nice tempo swing for you, because they were really counting on one of your units dying to that Sentinel, and now you get to keep it in play and push for more damage again in the future. So Trust Your Instincts has been a banger card, especially because it's just so easy to always have the Force with the amount of damage everything deals. Then we have 3 copies of Breaking In. It's like Surprise Strike, but it does 1 less power, and Saboteur, and then Surprise Strike, which is like Surprise Strike, in that it is +3/+0. It's like, I still think this is the best card in the game. It is crazy. Anytime you're running a yellow deck, you just start with 3 of this thing. It's rare to find a deck where you don't want to run that. I've done it in the past, and I've always felt like it's wrong. But here, that combination of Surprise Strike, Breaking In, Trust Your Instincts, these are all cards that Ezra Bridger can find when he completes an attack to allow you to get a mini Leia effect, like a Rebel Assault. You now get to use one of those to attack with another unit still in that same action phase, and that is going to give you huge, huge tempo swings on the opponent. And then finally, Hotshot Blaster. Of course, you need to run Hotshot because it's another Surprise Strike, except this one is +2/+0 and it sticks, right? Which means when you hotshot on Quinlan, he stays a 6/5. Then the opponent has to attack into him as a 6/5 and probably loses whatever they're attacking. You hotshot on a K2SO, and now it overwhelms for more potentially if you needed to attack something, or it's just even more obnoxious to attack into, and then they still have to take the 3 damage. Hotshot's always good. It's always good. And that's what it does in here. This deck, just attack your opponent's base. Attack, attack, attack. That is the way to win. This is for all the homies out there like me who sometimes just want to shut it off, do some basic aggro math and attack, and not have to worry too much about it. And Cal is the king of not having to worry about it, because even compared to like the Ahsoka deck that I posted, because of Cal's ability to exhaust things, you even more often get to just kind of not attack their board and not worry about it. You do have to worry about it, right? Because again, it's all about finding the timing for that exhaust. You want to make sure you play really carefully. Remember that exhaust is there because your opponent might forget sometimes. And you can get a key exhaust on unit. They play that Gunji, they put the General's Blade on, and you just go, cool, exhaust it. I guess you can do it next turn or something. Or maybe then you play the Disabling Fang Fighter, or, you can really catch your opponent off guard nicely with that ability. So just be thinking about that. But otherwise, I would say my general advice is most often you just want to attack their base, unless you have a really good read on taking something off the board right now is going to be a better long-term benefit for you. But the game going long is not usually in your benefit for this deck. So try and end it as quickly as you can, especially with this 25 health Temple of Destruction. Now, let's look at some sideboard options really quick that you might want to consider if you're taking this into some best of 3. And I have some slight bit of spice in here for you, maybe just a slight bit of some options you can consider. Put in that third Disabling Fang Fighter if your opponent's got a lot of lightsabers or things that you want to get rid of. Those Kylo decks maybe that are getting a little like, if the new Kylo decks, the new like blue-green Kylo decks can go a little too long for this deck, where this deck will usually beat them before they do anything significant on the board. So sometimes they have to play more to board, right? And if they're playing more to board, maybe putting lightsabers on stuff, that's where their deck's full of upgrades. So maybe the Fang Fighter is a little more useful there. But just in general, we're seeing some decks that are running not just General's Blade, but Luke's lightsaber, Yoda's lightsaber, constructed lightsaber. So you see more blades, put in that third Fang Fighter. Frisk. Now, Frisk is not great at killing most blades. The blades that he can kill are usually not too commonly played, but Frisk is pretty nice for dealing with shields and pilots sometimes as well. Some low to the ground pilots, occasionally you see those are pretty rare, but other Frisks I guess he can deal with. But I really do like him with some of the new shield production that exists, because some shields are going to be pretty obnoxious and you're going to give them value. Kira decks putting shields on stuff. Frisk is a way to bring it in against that Kira deck and go, okay, you want to put a Sentinel, you want to shield it. I'm at least just going to throw this pilot onto my ship and then get rid of your shield. And I think it's important to remember that Frisk is not a surprise strike because you don't get to attack immediately, but he does provide a power bonus that's going to be used that same turn. And so in some ways, he has that sort of velocity increase, even though it isn't an action economy thing. And so you can think of him slightly like kind of like a hot shot that also can get rid of a shield in the ground arena and make it just slightly more awkward for your opponent to deal with things. So I like him. I like him when he's got good matchups, when he's useful. Waylay. Now, if the opponent's going first and you are worried about them going Gunji Blade and start to accrue too much advantage, you can totally throw some Waylays in here. I don't think you need them necessarily because, again, Cal's Exhaust is going to do what Waylay does as a sort of a tempo gain in a lot of other matchups. So it's not always super useful, but you're going to get those matchups where you go, if the opponent drops Gunji Blade, I'm just going to have a lot of trouble. And you want to put those in just to say, you know what, just try redoing that. Lose the blade. You could replay the Gunji, I guess, if you want. And that can be a pretty nice tempo gain for you as well. So I really like that there. And of course, there are some other weird things that's useful against, like that turn 2 Executor deck, I guess, that I posted previously, if anyone's playing that. But Waylay's never terrible. It's just in this deck, it doesn't do damage. And we kind of want all our cards to do damage as much as possible. So you really want to have good purpose for it. Now, speaking of dealing damage, let's talk about Lothcat, because I think Lothcat is like kind of underrated. Actually, this is like a pre-release all-star, first of all, like limited, like this Lothcat was just, every time they had the Lothcat, they exhaust the thing and then they take initiative, and next turn they attack into something and exhaust the thing I want to attack with again. Lothcat can buy you a lot of time and is importantly targeted exhaust, where the opponent's going to be playing around, the Cal exhaust being they can exhaust the weakest thing, but Lothcat kind of turns that on its head. So I really like the Lothcat because what you're going to see a lot with this deck is those like Han 2, especially Han 2 mid-range decks, Vader 4, we'll have another card for that in a second, but Vader 4 mid-range decks, those decks are usually pretty good at dealing with your plays in a value sense and then just, beating you with bigger units. And I like the idea of bringing the Lothcat in there to go, okay, you get to that turn 4, turn 3, maybe turn 4, turn 5, when your opponent has got something down that's just going to keep clearing your board, and you can just play Lothcat, exhaust it, start doing some attacks. If you need to exhaust it again next turn, you attack it into something and exhaust another thing, and it just kind of, it's a unit on board that does some damage and also can just kind of control what the opponent is trying to get damage in with, and it sometimes is just that little push that you need. And finally, outmaneuver. Outmaneuver in here was my realization after I got dunked on by a couple of Vader 4s that just, they put a lot of TIE fighters into play. So like Cal can never exhaust anything relevant. He just exhausts TIE tokens every single time. And then they drop the Clone Combat Patroller, Clone Combat Squadron. That's what it's called. And that gets +1/+1 for every space unit they have. And they have a Victor Leader or something pumping everything. And it's just too much damage, and they do actually outrace you when they get that perfect start, usually requiring that they play the shuttle to capture one of your units as well on like turn 2. When they do that, they get like 2 ties into the coordinate capture, into the clone squadron, Victor Leader, whatever. They can outrace you because they've taken something off the board. You haven't really been able to exhaust much of their damage. They've been able to push a lot of it. But I found that if you just put outmaneuver in, as soon as they drop the Victor Leader or the Clone Combat Squadron, you just exhaust space. You usually now have the time that you need to exhaust things. If they drop Clone, obviously Victor Leader, you might want to exhaust then. Drop Clone, you take initiative, exhaust, and then attack more. That usually buys you just the time you need to close the game. So very, very sick tech against those Vader 4 decks if you've got them to deal with. But yeah, that's some options. Again, I never like to give you a dedicated sideboard. Tweak your deck, tweak my deck, change the cards you want, find what doesn't work. Maybe Ezra is dying too much for you. Find something else. Swap cards in and out and adjust your sideboard based on who you expect to play. If you're going to take something like this to Galactics, I would definitely expect to see a lot of mid-range, expect to see those Force decks, expect to see those Gungies. So this is really a sideboard where I think, yeah, I mean, like for the most part, I feel like this would be a pretty solid one to take to a wide event like Galactics. But if you're just taking this to locals, then think about what you're going to play against and make sure you have a little bit of a plan. If you enjoy playing Aggro, you enjoy playing Cal Kestis, you like the Jedi series and you just want to play him, I think you have a lot of fun with this deck. It's very potent, very powerful, does a lot of damage, and a great second deck for our deck profiles for Legends of the Force. And we got a couple more coming, so stay tuned. If you did enjoy this, please, I would love if you would give us a subscription down below. I know we post for multiple card games, but we are definitely pushing out a lot more Star Wars content here because we are absolutely, I've been playing so much Star Wars and I have been loving it and have all sorts of cool decks to share with you. We got a couple more profiles coming real soon, so I don't want you to miss those. Thank you so much for watching though. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Like the channel if you did enjoy it, and we will see you all in the next one.